Hello. Hello, this is the my artifact episode number 3352. Today's date is 6th of March 2025. It's been almost like a night at 10:30 p.m. All right, we directly jump into the question. Okay. All right. Question is, how would you improve the current method of scientific observation? Okay, that's a really good question. Okay, where is this question came from? Couple of weeks ago, I was actually watching the Demons of Leonardo. It's a web series based on Leonardo da Vinci. If you don't really know who is that person, the person who draw one of the world famous painting Mona Lisa. He is not just a painter; he is master of multiple things. While I was watching that particular show, I was bitterly influenced by his thought process, the way that he thinks, and yeah. So I wanted to think like him. I wanted to think like Leonardo. So I went to the ChatGPT, asked that he suggest me such a question so that I would think like Leonardo da Vinci. So this is one of those questions. The question says, how would you improve the current method of scientific observation? Okay, that's really good. Okay, yeah. How do you supposed to improve the method of scientific observation? Okay, so first of all, let's just understand couple of things. Okay, yeah. What's a scientific observation? Okay, yeah. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the invention first. Okay, yeah. So if you invent some certain thing, there are three reasons required to invent some sort of thing. Yeah, three reasons. First reason is the necessity. Okay, yeah. Like if we really need some certain thing, we invent a thing. Okay, like a moon mission. Okay, yeah. Like in 1969, a human went to the moon, landed on the moon. It's a kind of like a something necessity for the US because the Cold War and things like that. And US wanted to kind of like a something be a first kind of like a country to kind of like a step of foot on the moon. Okay, yeah. So at that time, lots of invention is actually happened is because of the necessity. Okay, yeah. Like how do you supposed to launch the rocket, lunar module, orbiter. There is a multiple Apollo mission is actually happened, not just kind of like a man mission. Before the man mission, there is a lot of thing is actually happened. We invented lot of things, a circuit board, a transistor, the how do we kind of like astronaut communicate with the people, a long range communication radio signals. We invented all those things is because of a necessity. Okay, yeah. So invention, if we wanted to invent some sort of thing, there are three reasons required. First is a necessity. If we are kind of like a somebody need a some sort of thing, we invent some sort of thing, that is called necessity. Okay. Another thing is that key observation. Okay, yeah, like if we wanted to invent some certain thing, we need to observe. Okay, yeah. um what is actually observation? Like how do you supposed to invent some sort of thing regarding about observation? Like a Newton's. Okay, yeah, like basically is this thing, the apple fall on the head of Newton. Okay, yeah. Newton is kind of like a figure it out why this apple fall on the ground and everything, and then Newton is actually invented the gravity. Okay, yeah. Observation, like this invention is actually happened is because of the observation. Okay, yeah. Then another thing is also, what is that another thing? Wait, I knew that. What's the another thing? um Imagination. Yeah, like we also kind of like invent some sort of thing through the imagination. What is actually imagination? Okay, yeah. The black hole. Yeah, like basically is this thing na ki um the Einstein is a kind of like a looking at the kind of like a something figure it out a calculation regarding about Like basically this, Einstein is a kind of like a somebody person who is always kind of like a look the world such a situation where he was kind of like a traveling on the speed of light. So how does he kind of like a see the world? Okay, how does the world he would see when he is a kind of like a simply a photon particle which a kind of like a simply move at the speed of the light? Okay, yeah. And he was kind of like a simply stuck at something that ki why I am kind of like a stuck at this speed. What do you stuck at this speed? Okay, so there is a universal law is that ki you won't be able to cross the speed of light. What do you mean? Like basically a car is actually moving, speed is almost like a 10 kilometer per hour. Okay, yeah. You kind of like simply put the pedal on the accelerator, and right now it's a 40 kilometer or 60 kilometer per hour, or maybe 70 kilometer per hour, or 100 kilometer per hour. Like basically this thing, it depends on how much you put the pedal on the accelerator. Okay, if you put too much, then it will get maximum means like that 200 kilometer per hour, which is like a really fast, right? Yeah. But there is a some certain speed. Okay, yeah. What is actually the maximum, what is actually the light speed? A light speed means like that ki 3 wait. Okay, let me google it. Let me google it. Okay. What is speed of light? Okay, so in kilometer per second, so it was almost like a 300, sorry, 3 3 lakh kilometer 3 lakh kilometer per second. Okay, so which is like a really massive speed. Okay, so basically this thing, the example that I mentioned earlier. Okay, if I put the pedal on the accelerator, the truck is actually moving 10 kilometer, 20 kilometer, 40 kilometer, 100 kilometer, 200 kilometer. Okay, yeah. Now what should we supposed to do? We put the kind of like a such a engine that that truck went to the light speed. What's the light speed? Means like that ki 3 lakh kilometer per second. Our engine is capable more than that. Like basically this thing, our engine is actually capable like a more than that. Like basically it could produce such a energy so that it could kind of like a simply went 3 lakh or 3.5 lakh kilometer per second. Okay, but our truck didn't really went that much fast. Like we are actually pushing a lot of pedal, but still that truck is not actually went to that, is not crossing the speed of light. And that is a universal law. Okay, yeah. Like basically on this universe, no one could kind of like a something cross the speed of light. Speed of light is a kind of like a something ultimate speed. Okay, beyond that is nothing really at all. And why, like why I'm kind of like a saying this thing in his, like why I'm actually in this particular, like why I'm kind of like a, what is like what kind of like a something a basis that you are actually saying this thing. Okay, yeah. I am not saying this thing. No, definitely not. It's a Einstein. Okay, yeah. Like Einstein wrote the paper regarding about the speed of light and things like that, and I watch a bunch of scientific videos, so that's why I'm kind of like letting you to all those things. Okay, yeah. And by the way, scientifically proved that ki there is nothing could go beyond the speed of light. Okay, yeah. We do a lot of kind of like a experiment, and that is proof that ki light speed is a kind of like a simply ultimate goal or ultimate reach that you shouldn't supposed to be cross that. It's yeah. So but it's kind of like a something is this thing now. The scientist like the Einstein was kind of like a something stuck at that. Why, like why I am not kind of like a something not going to the beyond the speed of light? Like what is exactly the reason that kind of like a holding me back? So he was kind of like a thinking that ki there is a some sort of kind of like a some object in our universe that is kind of like a somebody holding it, that means like that ki it's something that prevent, or it's something that kind of like a something, I don't know what exactly is this thing. Okay, yeah. And he figured it out that ki in our universe we might have a kind of like a particular object which is kind of like a so massive, which has a so much amount of gravity that light won't be able to cross. He just imagined that thing at that time. Einstein didn't really have any kind of like a practical evidence regarding about black hole, nothing really at all. Okay, and black hole is kind of like a some term is not even invented on that period of time. He was kind of like a somebody imagine that in our universe we do have a kind of like a some certain object in our universe which is kind of like a so massive, his gravity is so massive that light won't be able to kind of like a something pass, or light won't be able to kind of like a come. It's kind of like a completely a black. He was kind of like a imagine that thing. He didn't really have any kind of like a some evidence, but he imagined that thing. The black hole, the invention of the black hole is actually happened because of the Einstein's imagination. Okay, yeah. So do you get it? There are three types of invention. Like there are three reasons that really required to invent some sort of thing. First thing is necessity. Another thing is observation, and third thing is imagination. All right, yeah. Now the question says that ki, what is like how do we supposed to improve the current method of scientific observation? Okay, yeah. So how do we like you understand observation? Okay, yeah. Now let's talk about the scientific observation. Like what exactly is this thing? Okay, so a scientific observation means like that ki, okay, okay, I'm just kind of get to the point. Okay, yeah. What is exactly the scientific observation? A scientific observation means like that ki you are actually looking at some sort of problem or some certain situation for kind of like okay, yeah. It's a very difficult, but let me give you some sort of example, okay, that you might understand. Have you kind of like a something see microscope? Okay, like a microscope, like a basically this thing. Have you went to bio lab and there is a microscope and you just kind of like try to see the microorganism how it look like on that particular glass lab? Have you ever done that? Like I did that. Okay, yeah. Like not in my college. Like I didn't really have bio subject, but I went to kind of like a scientific research center, Raman Science Center in Nagpur, and I kind of like try to see the microscopic world. Okay, yeah. So when I try to see that particular thing, I was like really amazed by that particular process. Like when I see that particular thing, a very very tiny thing, I just realized that na ki how like how crazy was that. Okay, so what exactly happened na ki what I did actually. So in that particular research center, Raman Science Center, by the way, at the Raman Science Center Nagpur, I went there. There is a microscope. So basically there is a couple of slides. Okay, yeah. Slides, in that particular slide there is a couple of water. You just have to put that slide into that particular microscope and you just have to look at. Okay, yeah. And when I see that particular thing, which is like a really incredible, like a very tiny organism and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. Then I realized that ki this is so tiny that if I could wipe my thumb into that particular glass slab, I might gonna wipe out the entire ecosystem of that particular thing, a particular kind of like a something microscopic organism. So can I able to do that? So I have that curiosity and I did that. Okay, I just wipe out my thumb into that particular glass slab. Okay, and I try to see, and I realized that ki like basically before I wipe out there are almost like maybe so many tiny organism or things like that. Okay, yeah. Then I wipe out with my thumbs and there are little less organism was there. And I was realized that I was kind of like a something god of those kind of like a something so that I just wipe out the entire thing. Like I just feel like that I am a kind of like a something god. But what I'm trying to tell you in this particular experience is this thing that when you observe things from kind of like a something very different point of perspective, you get a very different way. A kind of like a something is this thing na ki our like in our normal day to day life we are actually looking at the world from our point of perspective, okay, like a human point of perspective, okay, and we are very used to with this thing. But what if you went to the underground, you actually see a very different point of perspective, like how does kind of like a something the sea creature is actually living the life and things like that. Or like when you see the microorganism into this microscopic telescope, you kind of like realize really amazing thing, okay, yeah. So when you change the perspective, you are kind of like a something very different thing, and that different thing is a kind of like a something very uniqueness, okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key observation, okay, yeah. Like basically this is kind of like a something example that I mentioned regarding about just observation, so that when you kind of like look the world very different point of perspective, you observe very differently, okay, yeah. Now let's talk about the observation, scientific observation. So you just imagine that ki you are a scientist, okay, yeah, and you have a kind of like a something really uh, you have a telescope, okay, let's say you have a telescope, a very big ass telescope that could kind of like see the entire planet, okay, yeah. Entire planet means like that a moon, yeah, let's take a moon, okay, yeah. So you have kind of like a something a telescope which is so much high resolution so that you could see the moon very clearly during the day, during the night, no worry at all, okay, yeah. And basically is this thing, you just locked your telescope regarding about on the moon, and basically you could see the moon day and night, and when okay, so when you try to see that particular moon day and night, you realize that the moon is tidally locked with our earth gravitational pull, means like that कि one side of the moon is always facing towards us, other side of moon that we won't be able to see because it's always in a dark, okay, yeah. And this is kind of like a something invention is actually happened through observation. Like I observed the moon, okay, yeah, with that particular telescope, and I observing observing the moon for day and night for almost like a month, and then I realized that ki the moon is kind of like a something tidally locked with our earth gravity, all right, yeah. So this is kind of like a something invention is like this is the invention na, like I have some sort of information which is kind of like a something really new, okay, yeah. And I do have kind of like a something evidence of proving my information is right, okay, yeah. So this is kind of like a something invention which is actually happened by the observation, all right, yeah. So we actually observe the moon, and we kind of like somebody invent a kind of like some sort of information, okay, yeah. Now the question was that ki how do I supposed to improve that particular method, okay, yeah. Not just this method, by so many method, like basically is this thing there are so many observations, scientific observation means like that ki basically is this thing there are like so many kind of like a something really that satellite or telescope that we have in our earth surface, we are kind of like a lock the particular star or particular planet for kind of like a days and nights and months, and we are kind of like a collecting the information, okay, yeah. um what are those, okay, yeah, like a what kind of like a only information that we are actually collecting by just looking at, okay, a lot, okay, yeah. Let me tell you one thing, look at the sun, by the way, no sorry, don't look at the sun okay, yeah. If you see the sun very directly, you gonna kind of like a simply hurt your eyes, and no, it's not really good. If you wanted to see the sun, then probably use some sort of shade glasses, then it might gonna work, okay. If you have kind of like a something like a chashma, then don't use that. Use kind of like a something goggles. Goggles are kind of like a something really helpful to see the sun directly. Okay, whatever. So basically this thing, look at the sun. Sun is a kind of like a something very amazing star. Okay, yeah. But when you observe the sun very closely, you realize that ki there is a kind of like a solar flare is actually happened. When you close to the sun, you realize that that solar flare is a kind of like a something so big that it kind of like a something like a really big, like a basically when the one solar flare is actually happened. What's a solar flare? A solar flare means like that, a kind of like a something like that, like a, have you seen the Mount Fuji? Mount Fuji is a kind of like a something mountain at Japan, which is kind of like a something very active volcano. Okay, yeah. So when that particular volcano hit, the entire magma, entire lava is kind of like a something just strike up, and it kind of like a something went, okay, went out. Okay, yeah. So that is exactly happened in the solar flare. Okay, yeah. So means like that na ki at that time there is a kind of like say mountains of lava or kind of like a something. Okay, it's very hard to explain this thing. um let's say balloon. Okay, let's say balloon. Okay, yeah. You fill the balloon with the water. Okay, and what should you supposed to do is that ki you poke the balloon with kind of like a some needle or something like that. So when you poke the balloon with that particular needle, the water went out. Okay, with kind of like a some sort of flow. Okay, like it has kind of like a flow that is called discharge of flow. Okay, yeah. The rate of discharge is depend upon how much pressure that inside the balloon. Okay, like basically if we squeeze the balloon, then probably rate of discharge is increase even more. Then that kind of like a, the rate of flow of water is kind of like a exerted too much, then we actually see a kind of like a something very big kind of like a something flare. Okay, yeah, a water flare. This is exactly happen in the sun too. Okay, yeah. In the sun situation, there is a kind of like a so much pressure regarding about the gravity, regarding about the hydrogen and helium fusion. So because of that particular pressure, that kind of like a something the lava is kind of like a something spread in a such a way it create a kind of like a something solar flare. Okay, yeah, this is exactly like that. Like you could imagine a kind of like a something when you poke the water, poke the kind of like a something water balloon, and water has kind of like a went out. This exactly happen in the sun. Okay, yeah, with lava. But that kind of like a something uh, the scale that you are at kind of like a something imagine is a far too big. Means like that solar flare or that solar thing is kind of like a solar lava or whatever. I don't really have any specific word for that, but it is so big that if you kind of like a stack up a earth, entire earth, it will cover almost like a 2 3 or to fill up the entire kind of like a some solar flare. It is that big. Okay, literally that big. Okay, yeah. So this is the kind of like a some information that I have is because of the observation. Means like that some people who are kind of like observing sun for kind of like a some couple of months or couple of year, and when they observe the sun very closely, they get that information that solar flare is exist, and these kind of like a some is this thing. So these are the invention, dude. Yeah, these are the invention of observe. These are the invention of information. Okay, yeah, and which is actually happened because of the observation. Okay, yeah. So that's why I just kind of like a somebody they wrote this kind of like a paper in the particular video, and I watched that particular video on the YouTube platform, and that's why I mentioned over here. Okay, but why, like a basically is this thing now, this is kind of like a something invention of information. All right, yeah. But why does it matter? Yeah, like a why like a basically is this thing now, key invention of telephone is kind of like a matter to me, but invention of solar flare is why does it didn't really matter, right? Yeah, that is really good. But it just like that na key try to understand. Okay, yeah. The invention of phone is kind of like a matter for so many people. Why? Because the phone that we use every single day, and it kind of like a something matter. Like right now I'm actually holding a phone which is kind of like a really matter for every person. Okay, yeah. But solar flare is a kind of like a something thing that people don't really consider as a important, because it has a very very significant importance for very very less people. Okay, yeah. Like only the scientific people who are kind of like associated with the kind of like a sun project, they might think that ki, this kind of like a something invention is really matter, but for the normal people it's nothing really at all right, yeah. But this is also called as an invention. Okay, yeah, because like a basically is this thing na ki invention is not just kind of like a something a thing. It's a kind of like a something the for early stage of invention is actually happen in the information format. Okay, yeah. And then whatever the information that we get, we kind of like collect that information and create a some certain thing that our lifestyle became little bit easier. Okay, yeah. Like basically is this thing na the telephone. Let's take a telephone. So Graham Bell is actually invented the telephone, right? Yeah. So it just like that, na Graham Bell kind of like a didn't really invent just a kind of like a thing that is called telephone. No, like basically is this thing na he kind of like a invent a some certain technique, so that how do we supposed to communicate, like what kind of like some things, like he figured it out that key electricity is a kind of like a somebody passing some sort of audio signals. So what if we could use that particular electrical signal so that we could transfer some sort of audio from one place to another place. So he kind of like a invented the information first. Okay, yeah. And then he tests that particular information with a practical practical evidence, like he put kind of like a condenser or wire or whatever it is. Okay, and he built some sort of thing, and that is we called as a telephone. All right, yeah. So basically the early form of invention is actually happening the information, not a thing. Okay, yeah. So basically right now we have information regarding about solar flare or tidally lock moon, which is kind of like a somebody invention of information. Okay, yeah. And right now we don't really have any kind of like a something a tool to utilize that particular invention into the activity, but still it might really essential because of that key. In the future we might kind of like a something build a, such a mechanism, or kind of like a build a, such a satellite which is kind of like a something orbit around the sun or orbit around the moon. So in that particular situation we really required some sort of information regarding about how does moon work, or how does sun work, or how does solar flare work, and things like that. Every tiny details we really required, so that we feed into that particular satellite, and that satellite will work together regarding about the information that we feed. So yeah, this is what it is now. Okay, so basically this thing, invention is really essential, and early form of invention is actually early form of invention is in the information, not in the thing. All right, yeah, you just have to figure it out that first. Okay, yeah. Now let's talk about the question that now you understand now what is actually observation and scientific observation. Okay, yeah. So is this thing, how do we supposed to kind of like improve the method of observation? Okay, how do we supposed to improve the method of observation? Okay, like basically this thing, I'm not a scientific guy. Okay, yeah. But there is a couple of things that I might kind of like consider as something that, okay, what are those? Okay, let's say stock market. Okay, yeah. So in the stock market are kind of like a something always be a talk about the numbers. Okay, yeah. Like this number, that number, and we are kind of like a something graph and things like that. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing na ki, okay, yeah. Let's talk about just number. Okay, now when when the stock market is kind of like a something release, or when the stock market are kind of like a something really a place where people would kind of like invest their money and gain some sort of things and stuff like that. I'm talking about almost like a 50 year ago, 50, yeah, 60 or 100 year ago. At that time stock market, mostly stock market are kind of like a something initiate or started. Okay, at that period of time they only have just a number. Okay, just a number regarding about this stock market have like a 1400 number, or this number or that number, or this much and that much. Okay, yeah. The people who associate with the stock market, they would understand what is actually meaning of that number. Okay, yeah. But as a normal person we don't really understand that number, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. Why? Because it's just a number. Okay, yeah. Now what we should supposed to do is that we actually kind of like a convert into the graph. When we convert into the graph, we realize that, oh, like this is it, this is that. Okay, if you still not understand the stock market example, then I'm gonna kind of like telling you another example. All right, yeah. Let's say you are the shopkeeper. Okay, yeah, and you are kind of like a something doing a shopkeeping. Okay, yeah. So in that particular shopkeeping, you are kind of like a something gain some sort of money. Like you will gonna earn some sort of money every single day, like a 2000, 3000, 2500, 4000, 5000. When there is a season, it might be 10,000. All right, yeah. So these are kind of like a some certain number. Okay, how you won't be able to analyze that particular number. Okay, yeah. What if I just put into the graph? Means like basically at Monday you earn 2000 rupees, at Tuesday you earn 2300, at Thursday you earn almost like a 3000, at next day you will earn almost like a 4000. So this is kind of like a something normal, and basically at the Saturday you might almost like a 4500, at Sunday it went to 7000. So basically what is actually happened now, you realize that ki at the early weeks, means like that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you will get almost like a 2000, 3000. Okay, yeah. But when the weekend is actually happened, like from the Friday, Saturday and Sunday, these are kind of like a something so extensive that people are spending so much amount of money, especially on Sunday people are spending so much amount of money. So what is this kind of like a something information is really matter, is that ki you shouldn't supposed to be take a leave on Sunday. As a shopkeeper, you shouldn't supposed to take a leave on Sunday. Why? Because of that Sunday is really crucial time for earning money. So you shouldn't supposed to take a leave. Like if you wanted to take a leave, take a Tuesday or kind of like a Thursday, but don't take a leave at Sunday, because Sunday is a kind of like a time where people would kind of like buy some sort of stuff from our store. So it is really essential to keep the store open, and not only open but as also all the things like all the equipments and all those groceries, and like all the store is actually function properly 100%, so that customer will not get any kind of like a hesitation, and we will gonna earn lot of amount of money. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that key whatever the number that we have, we utilize that number, observe that number, that key regarding about when will I get profit a lot. And when I get that particular profit and I realize that ki Sunday is a day that I get most profit, so I took the decision that ki shopkeeper should supposed to be work 100% on a day of Sunday. Okay, yeah. So this is kind of like a something improve your observation technique. Okay, yeah. Like you observe some sort of thing and you take the action to improve yourself or improve your things and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. So this is called like basically you are converting from number to word. That is called kind of like a something your observation from just a number to a graph, because graph is a kind of like a something a structure so that we could understand much better way. Number is a kind of like a something thing that we usually not really understand that much. Okay, you get it. Okay. So this is what kind of like a something improve the observation method. Okay, there are also so many methods so that you would kind of like improve the method of observation. um like artificial intelligence right now, AI is a kind of like a something which is like a really incredible tool that we have, that we invented. Okay, yeah. I use AI for kind of like a something for my content creation process regarding about creating title, subtitle, as also like I'm kind of like a writing a book with this AI. Okay, yeah. Like basically this thing, the stuff that I kind of like a somebody talk, I just kind of like a transcribe that particular audio into the text format, and that particular text format convert into the really fun way so that I would fun to read, and I kind of like a make a book on it. Okay, which is really incredible. I kind of like a generate images from the AI. It was really essential. And as also whenever I stuck at somewhere, I ask a bunch of questions to the artificial intelligence, and it kind of like helped me in so many ways. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, that key you always gonna improve your observation technique in multiple ways. Okay, yeah. In a graph or AI, or there are so many ways. Like I don't know at this moment, but there are so many ways so that you would kind of like a simply invent the observation skill or observation technique. By the way, there are a couple of observation techniques that they mention, that they should supposed to be improved. What are those? Enhance the data collection and AI automation. Oh, that is a really good thing. Okay, what is there really that? Okay, let's take a self-driving car. Okay, yeah. So let's take an example. How does car can drive? Okay, how does driver could drive the car? So basically, is this thing, na driver is actually drive the car regarding about the experience that he has. Means like that, ki how much space that we have, and regarding about the space, can we kind of like a drive this car on that particular road or not? Is there any kind of like a, some obstacles ahead or not? We kind of like create that particular scenario, and we figure it out regarding about experience that ki could we drive our car from this road or that road or not. Okay, yeah. So this is what kind of like a some experiences actually matter. But while you are driving automated drive car, which is kind of like a something very tricky. Why? Because a robot won't be able to have any experience, but it has so much amount of data. What do you mean by that? So in a self-driving car, we put lot of sensor, like a front, right, back, side, left. So much puts the sensor, so that as a the person, as a not a person but as a robot, when he drive the car, he would have all the information regarding about any objects at the front, side, left, whatever it is. Okay, yeah. Regarding about the object, he also kind of like a something gyroscope, so that regarding about the car is actually stable or not. Okay, how much gravity is actually impact, how many people are in there, what is actually weight of the weight of the car, as also is this thing, how much speed should supposed to be maintained, and then is there any traffic signal or not. So these are kind of like a something, so much information that we are actually collected from the sensors. Okay, like we put lot of cameras, gyroscopes, sensor, there are so many sensors, by the way. If we put that much sensor, then definitely we will gonna build a self-driving car. And yeah, like a self-driving car is also kind of like exists in this world. Like we have Tesla car, which is kind of like a somebody so efficient to kind of like a somebody drive the entire car, like basically a self-drive car. Okay, yeah. And these are exist, by the way. Okay, yeah. So like a basically is this thing na ki we are kind of like a gather the information regarding about the observation. Like basically is this now what is actually is this thing that ki before we usually drive the car, just observation and things like that. But right now, instead of human observation, we put sensors, and that sensor is kind of like a doing the same thing, and also kind of like a even better than that. Means like that as a human really required some sort of rest, so that we could drive the car. Okay, yeah. If that human won't get that stress, then probably he would gonna sleep during the driving the car, and that might be kind of like a some very disaster situation. So it is really essential to kind of like a replace a human mistake to into the kind of like a simply a sensor, so that I would rely, and basically the entire experience of driving became something really safe and something really great. Okay, yeah, because it will always be rely on practical evidence and practical things, because sensor are kind of like a collecting data from all those sources from the car around this and everything. So which is kind of like a something really good. Okay, yeah. So basically in this particular method, like enhance the data collection and AI automation, which is kind of like a something really cool way to improve the technicality, improve the observation. Yeah. Real time and high resolution imaging. Oh, this is also kind of like a something really good. Okay, yeah. Advanced, like I'm not gonna talk about that. Like I'm really tired to talk right now. Like basically it's been almost like a 38 minute. I'm just talking. But yeah, still okay, let's talk just couple of pointers, and let's say citizen science and crowdsourcing, expanding public participation can gather more observation data globally. Smartphone based sensor like enable everyday people to contribute. Augmented and virtual reality, oh yeah, that is really good. Yeah. Okay, what's the augmented and virtual reality? Okay, yeah. Let's say F1 car. Okay, yeah. So F1 car is a kind of like a something very fast vehicle, by the way. Okay, yeah. The nominal speed is almost like a 160 to 180 or 200 kilometers. It's a nominal speed. Okay, yeah. And as also F1 car went 300 to 400 kilometer per hour, which is like a really insane speed, by the way. Okay, yeah. So in that particular speed, and if you wanted to maintain the maintain the car in that particular speed, we really required some sort of thought process, kind of like a sort of downforce. What's a downforce? Okay, yeah. Have you seen the aeroplane? So aeroplane has a kind of like a simply wings. Okay, yeah. That wing are kind of like a create the lift. Okay, yeah. A lift means like that is a kind of like a something so that like a when the plane is actually moving for almost like a 300 400 kilometer per hour, then probably those wings are kind of like a help that particular object to fly. Okay, similar mechanism is actually happened on the birds. Okay, like when they fly, they actually have a wing, and that wing is kind of like a tilted up, so that we would kind of like a create the drag under, and when that drag create under, we would get the some sort of lift, and our object try to fly when to fly. Okay, so that is called upper lift. Okay, yeah, like a up force, that is called up force. Okay, yeah. In the F1 car, you don't really get the F force like a up force, you have to get the down force. What's a down force? Okay, yeah. And why it matter? So basically this thing कि, in the F1 car, it is really essential to car has to be stick with the ground, not to the fly. Okay, yeah. Because why? Because if the car is actually going for almost like a 300 or 400 kilometer per hour, which is really massive speed, in that particular speed, a car has to be touch with the floor. Why? Because it will kind of like a something create the traction between the tire and ground, and as also we could move easily, we could rotate, or we could kind of like a turn the car as fast as we can. And for that particular thing, we really require the connection between the tire and surface as much as we can, and that is kind of like a something very difficult for that particular speed. Because if our normal car went to that 400 or 500 kilometer per hour, our car will fly. Why? Because a normal car didn't really have that downforce that much. Okay, yeah. Like basically this is what's a downforce. Like if you still not understand the downforce, okay, yeah. Have you seen a kind of like a something really that like behind the car we have kind of like a some wings. Okay, yeah. In normal car it's a so small wing that we won't be able to see, and basically in a normal car these are kind of like a somebody utilized as a kind of like a somebody for looking good point of perspective. Okay, yeah. But in the F1 car, if you could imagine the F1 car, in the F1 car at the behind the car they have kind of like a something a propeller at the back, which kind of like a something create the downforce. Means like that it kind of like a tilted down, so that whatever the air will get up, and that up will create the resistance to the object down, so that is create the downforce. Okay, yeah. Like if you don't really know, just type the Google search about the downforce in F1 car, you just get the images, watch a couple of videos. It was really good. Okay, yeah. So so basically this thing na ki F1 car is always kind of like a facing that much amount of speed. Okay, yeah. So how do we supposed to kind of like invent that particular, like how do we supposed to improve F1 car? We really required to kind of like see the car on that particular speed. Okay, and but how do we supposed to see? We won't be able to see. Why? Because of that this car is actually moving so fast that probably we won't be able to see that much. Like just imagine na, like a 400 kilometer per hour, which is like a really massive speed. Okay, yeah. So in that particular process, if we don't really see the particular car in practical life, we would see that particular car in virtual reality. What's a virtual reality? Okay, a virtual reality is a kind of like a something a medium, a kind of like a something a space where you could create a some certain scenario, and regarding about that scenario, you could kind of like a something get a study into it. Means like that ki put the VR goggles. Okay, yeah. And in that VR goggles, we could see the car, okay, which is actually moving 300 and 400 kilometer per hour. Okay, yeah. And when that 300 400 kilometer per hour, we could see that particular, like regarding about the information that collected from that augmented reality, we could see the everything regarding about how does drag forces actually happen to the car, where it get lift, where it not get lift, how does pressure, how much traction force is actually happened. Like you could see kind of like so many details when you put the VR or AR augmented goggles into it, and basically we could see the world very differently. Okay, yeah. So this is what kind of like a somebody so many thing as also augmented reality glasses or goggles are kind of like a somebody also help you to play the games, means like that key. Usually we have kind of like a somebody screen so that we would play the game on the screen, but if we have a augmented reality glasses or goggles, we would kind of like a simply play the game in the game. Okay, yeah, in the game means like that we are in the game. So this is kind of like a something really interesting invention will gonna happen. Okay, yeah, like basically how does it supposed to be happen invention just playing a game? Well, example, okay, yeah, that key reloading a gun. Okay, yeah, in real life you might not have a gun and you might not have a chance to reload a gun, but you will definitely get chances to reload the gun in a game environment. So if you have that augmented reality and things like that, you might knew that you might gonna know that how gun will gonna look like in your hand. And as also is this thing, there are so many augmented reality goggles and haptic feedback controller like a PS5 controller, which is kind of like a giving you equivalent amount of information regarding about how do you supposed to hold the gun and how do you supposed to feel the gun when you fire the gun, how much kind of like an impact on yourself, which is kind of like a, somebody giving you some sort of values and experience, which is really incredible. Okay, yeah. And somewhat it kind of like a giving you information that when you hold the gun in real life you might gonna reload that gun because you did this thing previously in the game a lot. So this is might be a okay, but still these are kind of like a something is this thing that I don't know. Yeah, but I think that na ki augmented realities and virtual reality are kind of like a simply way so that you would observe and invent a thing, which is like a really incredible. Yeah, really, really incredible. Then quantum and AI power computing and pattern recognition. Well, these are kind of like some very deep topic. I am not going to talk about that thing later because like I'm really tired to talk for almost like a 47 minute I'm talking. So yeah, these are kind of like a simply way so that you would kind of like improve the scientific observation. All right. Yeah. All right. This is it. I should supposed to be end here. And thank you.